Okay, so Elon Musk is beefing with Apple and CEO Tim Cook again. It's been a long festering wound, and it's only been getting increasingly complicated as Elon's AI interests grow rapidly and come up against Apple's struggle to survive with their own AI efforts failing. I've got Brian Wang with me today to make sense of what's going on. Brian is an expert deep tech analyst, investor. He's a futurist thought leader, and he runs the prominent science blog nextbigfuture.com. Good to have you back on, Brian.
Good to be here, Ryan.
All right. So, for those wondering what this latest beef between Elon and Apple is all about, let me just quickly take you through the timeline of this spat because it goes really right back to the early days of Tesla and the Model 3 program. And bear with me because you need to understand the evolution through some of Elon's own posts on X. So let's have a look at them, right? So this is where he's talking about what happened with the Model 3 program, right? He says, and this was from December 2020. He says, during the darkest days of the Model 3 program, I reached out to Tim Cook to discuss the possibility of Apple acquiring Tesla for 1/10 of our current value. He refused to take the meeting. Then there is this post from the 30th of July, the following year, 2021, where he says Apple App Store fees are a de facto global tax on the internet. Epic is right. Now, this was in response to the Epic Games controversy, right, Brian?
Yep. They have Fortnite. They were trying to get control and have less of the Apple fees of about 30-some%.
Correct. And then there was this post. This was on the 30th of July, 2021. He says he was responding to Omar, saying he actually liked and uses Apple products. They're just obviously overcharging with App Store. He says, 30% fees for doing almost zero incremental work is completely unreasonable. Epic wouldn't bother processing their own payments, as you rightly pointed out right now, if App Store fees were fair. Normally, competitive pressure would force Apple to lower fees, but Apple and Android have a duopoly on phones, and this duopoly is going to come up again in our discussion. When interface familiarity is taken into account, it's basically a monopoly. The effective 30% sales tax Apple charges is hidden from users, or there would be an outcry. All right, let's take a look at this next one. This is from the 10th of June. He says 2024, this is last year. He says if Apple integrates OpenAI at the OS level, then Apple devices will be banned at my companies. This is an unacceptable security violation. And this is where we see that first transition from one phase of this spat or feud perhaps into a next, because this is the beginning of the consolidation of the AI on-device verticals. We're seeing a lot of activity between OpenAI, Microsoft, its competitors, and this is the first inkling that it's going to take a different direction. Tim Cook, of course, had said it's personal, powerful, and private, and it's integrated into the apps you rely on every day, include introducing Apple Intelligence, and that's what Elon responded to by saying, don't want it. Either stop this creepy spyware on all Apple devices, or all Apple devices will be banned from the premises of my companies. But that's not all, because then that feud gets worse. And here he is. This is, I believe, the latest, the first of the latest flurry of posts. This is from August 12th. That's yesterday. He says, hey, Apple App Store, why do you refuse to put either X or Grok in your must-have section when X is the #1 news app in the world and Grok is number 5 amongst all apps? Are you playing politics? What gives? Inquiring minds want to know. And then this is just the beginning of a flurry of posts. He says, and why is ChatGPT literally in every list where you have editorial control? Another post from him, antitrust behavior by Apple. And yet another where he says Apple is behaving in a manner that makes it impossible for any AI company besides OpenAI to reach #1 in the App Store, which is an unequivocal antitrust violation. XAI will take immediate legal action. So it's getting more and more intense. And then he says Apple behaves like it's owned by OpenAI. What is happening here? We're seeing an evolution of this feud. Brian, break it down for us.
Apple and Google do have a duopoly. You have the App Store and you have the Google Play Store. App Store is about twice as big money-wise. Google with Android has more users, but they both have a lot of control. There is um, antitrust investigations that have been launched against Google. So, could affect their Chrome browser situation, which we'll discuss later. Um, so in terms of our on-ramp to the internet, mobile is where it's at. I think mobile, 60, 70%, something like that, that is people going through their mobile phones onto the internet. And so that is the primary on-ramp to that. And access and distribution of AI, like OpenAI, or X, is one of the primary battles. So, like, if you have the AI that is roughly comparable, a bit better, a bit worse, then people will stay on whatever platform they're on. Accessing it through a browser, accessing it through the the phone. Um, if you're on Meta, Facebook, then you would use whatever AI they're presenting to you. So the distribution is a lot of where the AI battle's happening, unless one was to get um, vastly superior, enough to cause a switch.
Okay, so you have Apple that's been struggling with Siri AI, right? And we know that Apple's been on the lookout for an AI partner. And then you have OpenAI that's tied up with Microsoft, and then it's getting closer to Apple. And you've got Perplexity that tied up with Motorola, and now it's, again, we're going to talk in a little bit about how it's making an unsolicited bid for Chrome. Is this just about AI on device, or is it just about the entire AI ecosystem being threatened by the rise of the latest entrant, that's Grok and XAI?
Um, it's where things are now, because, like I said, primarily right now we're going through smartphones onto the internet. So you're going to use AI generally with the internet. So then you need to um, control those on ramps and distribution of being presented, access to. Just like, if you had a search engine battle, like, before Google became dominant, then, once you get to a certain mass of users and other things, then you get um, more control. Um, OpenAI had about 800 million people who have used it at any point. I think probably up to a billion now. It's doing rapid growth. Um, and X and XAI with Grok might be in the number two position, um, because they have 600 some million people who use X, and then some significant fraction of those people use Grok um, from that. And also they are going through Telegram as well. So they made deals on distribution deals on that. Um, I would think that Apple would, it'd be better for them to, to do deals with both, or even all, three or four of the AI things, and to, let the users choose as opposed to favoring one. But uh, I'm not sure what kind of deal they would get from OpenAI and Microsoft that would make them prefer that. Because on the search side, they've done the deal with Google, where they get a tens of billions of dollars payment from them for their
Right,
search
right.
preference. Um, X and XAI could become a major competitor as soon as you know early next year, maybe end of this year, when they get SpaceX Starlink going to all phones. They've already launched texting to all phones from T-Mobile, and that's
Yeah,
a $10 per month service. I
yep,
presume that SpaceX gets $5 per month on that, and that would give them a foothold onto phones, because you would then have a particular application that you would have to get um, the connection to the SpaceX service,
yep.
um,
Direct to
and
cell.
and making their own phone to totally control that. If you control the communication on the back end, you have control the device. That would be a way to do it. Whether they do that with a They could do it with a stripped down version of Android, I guess, if they want to, or they could do something, completely newly built. But they could get to billions of phones within 2, 3 years, if they were to really push that. So um, that is something that would put things on more equal footing. But we're in the transition phase between
Right.
here and there.
Yeah. Yeah. To be fair, to play the devil's advocate, that you could see why Apple is doing this. You could see why Microsoft is doing what it is, why OpenAI is doing what it is, because these are all. I mean, they're not here for charity. At the end of the day, it's cutthroat competition, and when there's a shakeout in the market, you're going to have someone being rubbed the wrong way, right? So Apple is actually acting in its own interest, as is OpenAI. So to flip it, is it fair for Elon to be behaving in this manner?
Yeah, I think it's fair for all of them to do whatever, like I said, they cut deals, they work in their own interests, so that's all fine. Whether they're making the right choices, that's another question, because, if Apple had bought Tesla back in the day, they've been far more valuable. It would have been the good move to get, to dominate electric cars if Apple had actually Tim Cook had taken the call and they had actually done that deal. Um, so when I look at this, yes, there's the near term battle, the struggles and that kind of stuff, but to um, you know, getting into a battle and to get into a fight with Elon has has risks that like
Hmm.
they get the SpaceX Starlink stuff working, getting to the billions of devices. That's a lot of control on the back end, right?
Yeah,
He
yeah,
could do a deal with all the cell phone companies, and then Apple's in front of the cell phone companies,
yeah,
but he could start wresting control from the back end of
yeah,
things.
yeah,
So Apple
and
doesn't have to fight that. They could ally
yeah,
with that instead.
yeah.
And then
And you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a consumer-led market, right? The
right,
customer is always right, and if your product sells, you're fine. If it doesn't, you're in big trouble.
right.
And I think Apple is in those troubled waters right now, which is why, and it's ironic that going back to his tweet, uh, if Apple had, in fact, as you said, bought out a part of Tesla, how different would things be right now, right?
Hmm.
Okay, so but when you look at each of his companies, it's so transformative and disruptive, right?
Mhm.
It's only natural again that you know Apple cannot afford to take it lying down. But you also have a duopoly here, right? And we heard him say that in one of those posts, Apple and Android. So how does Elon break this duopoly and also protect the interests not only of his companies, his customers, his shareholders as well?
Well, one is just with really good products, right? If XAI Grok becomes the dominant AI, then consumers will want to choose it, and companies that try and stop them from going to it, will lose. So make a really great product. Make the direct to cell phone thing for voice and internet, and get it onto billions of devices. So um, if you're an innovator and your innovation executes, then you have that control. For X is also X payments, where they're talking about he created PayPal first and then was
Yeah,
sold,
yeah.
and he still has plans to do that where um, X could become the place where you do all your payments and banking and those kinds of
The
things.
everything app, yeah.
The Everything app, right? So with that kind of control, there is risk of Apple being disintermediated, which um, it may be, if we were to look forward and say the choice is to ally with that when you have some power now, right?
Hmm.
Cut the deal now because they're going to succeed and do it. But if
Yeah.
you're, saying I'm going to make the bet that they won't succeed, and I make the bet I can stop and fight them. If you lose that fight and innovation works, then you've just created an enemy that is more powerful than you, right? The other thing on the Google side is that they are under DOJ investigation. So there are antitrust activities that are currently ongoing. Usually these things are um, rearward looking, like Microsoft's um, when they got their DOJ antitrust things happening, it was many years after they'd already been, running their monopoly, and then toward the tail end where their monopoly was breaking up because they're not as dominant, on the desktop because now have more Macs than PCs. Then, it's something where um, you lose your monopoly battle just as your power is weakening.
That's interesting, because as you rightly pointed out, there's a serious consolidation going on, not just in the AI and device sector, but also the search, the whole blue link economy, as it's called, the Google search economy. So you've had the Microsoft deal with OpenAI, the Perplexity AI deal with Motorola, and now we're seeing reports that Perplexity, as we've been signposting here, has made an unsolicited $34 billion bid for Chrome. It's all happening very fast. So it's all the more reason now, don't you think, for Elon to really say, okay, let's just build a new vertical, which is the phone, the X phone. You have the Everything app. You need just the one device to rule them all, whether it's XAI, whether it's X payments, Grok, Robotaxi, Starlink, everything. One device, one number across the world. Nothing to beat that.
Yeah, so he has other platforms that are up and coming that could get to scale, but they are a few years behind, which are the Tesla bot. If he can make billions of Tesla bots, that could be the new phone. If he makes hundreds of millions of cars, right? And the reason I say that is because they have more batteries, 3,000 watts instead of 100 watts for your laptop, 5 watts for your phone. So compute correlates to energy levels. So you could run petaflop chips in a Tesla bot, which could have 20 times the compute versus whatever phone you have. And it's not like, oh, I have to carry a big server. Your 50 kilogram or 30 kilogram server is walking around with you because it's a Tesla bot, right?
Right.
So that is I think would become the superior form factor as the next phone. But that would
really
be
interesting.
That's
So
5
you
years
no
away.
longer have a device; you have a companion, which
Right.
hitherto has been a device.
Right.
But here you have an embodied AI companion,
right,
that you could talk to, interact with.
It's like C3PO from Star Wars, or Data from whatever, walking around with you, answering all your questions, doing all your work. Yes.
Yeah. And then you have a neural link in time, maybe 10 or 20 years down.
Right.
And then your throughput bandwidth is a lot more, your bit rate is a lot more, so you're directly connected to AI.
Right.
Interesting. So what you're suggesting is that the mobile device, the handset as we know it today, could very well disappear.
Right. But that's 5-10 years down the road.
Yeah, of course.
But for now, there is disruption coming to the handset thing, where you can get it directly connected up to SpaceX Starlink, go anywhere. It's already having texting anywhere, transmitting pictures and stuff. So that full satellite capability is coming. And Apple has chosen to again fight Elon at that point, where T-Mobile is using, and 7 other phone companies around the world are using SpaceX Starlink, and Apple's chosen to partner with a smaller startup, AST Mobile, that has only a handful of satellites up that can do that service.
Right.
So
OneWeb or Project Kuiper.
I think OneWeb is on an enterprise level. I don't think they're doing anything commercially.
Okay. So, but what about those who cannot afford a C3PO? Let's say even 2 decades down the line. Wouldn't the phone still be a valid device?
Yeah, I think phone will be a valid device, and going to a super cheap, inexpensive phone that has low level, a more basic connection. Although with in rural areas, you would be able to get 4G and 5G with Starlink. Going into cities, they'd have to have some other
Especially with
solution.
Gen 3 satellites, right?
Right, especially Gen 3 satellites. But even with March, in March, the FCC allowed them to increase the power transmission by 10 times, which
Right.
lets them get to higher speeds. And also they're doing stuff to increase spectrum and all those kind of things. So it will be a very powerful thing, which you could go to all the Asian, all the people with
African countries.
every country that need to have that. So then you would get to the low end and come up to take over. So they could totally upend the economics of that to and get a very compelling devices to get to mass market. They could either take out the bottom 80%, with by going to starting completely low end where no one else can compete, and then coming up and then adding more and more features, and especially if it's a everything app front end
Hmm.
where you're doing financial and other things, you could give away the phones and then use it as a means to get on. So I view that as something where there's so many options about how Elon and SpaceX X can compete when you can control the back end and it can control the financial aspects of it. There's so much money to be made there by having a lifetime user that that's gonna be coming. Which I think
That sounds a
Apple.
lot like the Apple ecosystem, where once you're in, you're in.
Right. It's also the WeChat, everything app
Yeah.
thing in China, where
Yeah.
all the payments are done through that, and the level of control is there, which is just once Elon executes upon that, then all of these other battles are easier to win if you just innovate and do
Mm.
it. Which, for me, looking at it, he announced it. It's kind of like, well, once you execute and do it and launch it, then you're fine. They may be, they've had a certain number of states that they had approvals on. They've had some delays there. So politically, those fights may actually be more relevant of them trying to throw wrenches in the works, trying to slow down the regulatory approvals on that end.
Right. Right.
But Elon still has reasonable relationships with the federal government, so
Mhm.
certain things
Yeah.
may be unblocked there.
Yeah. And that relationship definitely appears like it's on the mend to some extent, right?
Right.
And it's really good to see, especially for the shareholder community. Okay, so be that as it may, this particular unsolicited bid.
Yeah. So Google Chrome is that forced divestiture could happen because of a Department of Justice antitrust case. So there is a judgment coming on that where they could be forced to divest. The fact that Perplexity, made a particular announced bid. There are other bidders who want to do that. OpenAI is one of them.
Mhm.
There's some Yahoo related group and others like that. So there's other um, private equity. So there'd be more than one bidder for this. They were just
Sure.
jumping the gun, anticipating a
Yeah.
judgment where they would have to divest.
Right. And of course, Perplexity, the whole interface for their Comet, the AI browser Comet, is built on top of Chrome.
Mm.
So it's a natural extension for them
Mm.
to then want to take over or make a bid for Chrome. Google Search has been our knowledge companion, our search companion, like for so long, right? That's another form of our interaction with the World Wide Web. When that now changes, whether it is through Google's own AI into an AI assisted companion, how do you then see Perplexity's bid, which is built Comet on top of that, on top of Chrome? And I've used Comet, and it's a far superior product than Chrome in so many ways, at least for me. So, how do you see that particular evolution?
Um, it is the final software layer upon whatever device you're accessing through, whether it's laptop or whether it's smartphone. Um, I think that it there will be a change where it will become less important, right? But for
Mm.
now, it's still important. So again, the stuff we're talking about now is stuff that matters for the next um, 3
10
to
years
10 years, right? Right.
max. Yeah.
And then it won't really matter. It's just like did whatever software layer from 30 years ago does it still matter?
Right. Do you think by then we'd have much wider access to Neuralink implants, and then that itself is another device
Mm-hmm.
that could just transform search and just transform the way you interact with not only the web but also AI?
Mm-hmm. That has to get to a series of breakthroughs related to, probably like Tesla bots, a precision Tesla
Mm.
bot performing the surgery. Like they have a machine to do the surgery. Would they have a high precision Tesla bot that can do the surgery?
Yeah.
You need to get it to mass production.
Right.
So it seems 10 years to get to um, blindness and other, like where you're solving a really big problem where it's like it's not as optional,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So blindness, hearing, spinal injuries, those kind of things. So that's where
Right.
they're working on the medical side, where um, the transformation is so much bigger
Yeah.
because of that
But
thing.
I mean, in terms of just the user interface
Mhm.
and the way we interact with information that's available online, or we interact with AI right now,
Mhm.
and to go from like a Google search to an AI based browser like Comet to
Yeah,
then go to something like a Neuralink chip.
yeah,
That's an evolution of a user interface in itself, right?
right. So it depends upon them being able to get the fidelity and the bandwidth such that instead of typing at most or speaking at most like 100 words a minute, if I'm going to a million words a minute and having this super high bandwidth communication between
Mm.
myself and the machines, then if that value is there,
Right.
first to fix ailments for people, and then later for this, where we become cyborgs with the devices, then you need to get the performance up. So get the technology, get the performance up, get the communication speed up. And then um, there are ways to do that communication where you didn't um, have to cut the thing into the skull, right? You can have something that sits there, and you can have non-invasive communication in. Although um, Elon's saying that the small wires are able to more directly connect to it. There are other companies that work on it where you don't have to have going through the skull. The other thing is that the cochlear ear implants,
Mm.
those have direct connections into the brain as well. So you can go through your ear and get
Yeah.
into the brain access. So then, but one is performance. Get the bandwidth up. Get the possible communication up where it's like 10,000 times, 100,000 times better than other means of communication, right? And then do you have non-invasive or invasive? And then um, provide, show that there would be value there, that I can have this ultra high bandwidth communication, millions of bits per second. Then that would pull in the usage where it's like, okay, I can make tens of millions, a billion of these things,
Yeah.
and I have communication where it's not just a little bit faster, but a lot faster, and capabilities
Yeah.
that you can't otherwise do.
Because then you also have the potential for a hive mind in society.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things that you could, a form of telepathy and those kinds of things. But it
Yeah.
would
That's
be
wild.
something that the people who are blind, have spinal injuries, they do
Yeah.
that
Who
first
get
because they have
priority
the
first.
need. Well, they have
Yeah.
the need for it, and then they could also say, oh, and by the way, because I have this, then I have these other capabilities, right?
Right.
And then you would then pull it. But they have to get to a lot of units, and they have to get
Mm.
to a lot of capability,
Yeah.
and then once they
Take
have
the
that
mass market.
beachhead, then they can go mass market, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Mhm.
Thank you. It's wonderful talking to you and linking
Yeah,
all these threads together and stitching them together into this, vibrant tapestry of ideas that this brilliant future that we're heading towards represents. So thank you.
right.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.